Now, last time we're talking about, what are we talking about? The continual offering in the Beit HaMikdash. In the Beit HaMikdash, there was every day was offered a sheep in the morning and a sheep in the evening, and it was totally consumed. It was called an olah. It was totally burned up on the altar, and totally burned up on the altar. And this was done every day, whether on Shabbos, holidays, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. And then there were additional offerings. There were Musaf offerings for special days. You know, on Shabbos there was 2 more, and then on the other holidays there was sometimes 7 more, 9 more other offerings. And on the other holidays there was also offered up a ram, and sometimes even a goat and an ox, several oxen. But on Shabbat there was just these 2 sheep were offered up. And then because of Shabbat, there was offered up 2 extra sheep. Okay, but now we're talking about the first original 2 sheep that was offered up every single day. It was called a tamid. And the Rebbe is trying to show that the offerings, that wasn't just something that was particular to the Holy Temple, but rather it was according to spiritual, godly principles in the relationship between the Jews and God. And as you remember, God wants the Jews to serve him. That's called serving God. That's the reason he took them out of Egypt, right? He said, go to Paro and say, let my people go so they should serve me. Shalachat ami v'yavduni. Serving God. And on the Mount Sinai, it says to serve God on this mountain. Tavdun et Elokim ala har, is a serving God. You're supposed to serve God with happiness. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. And it says, if you don't serve God, Mirov calls this it's a punishment. You have to serve God with happiness. So here's this idea. What is serving God? The high point, the most concentrated, perfect example of serving God is prayer. Prayer is called avodah. How do we learn we're supposed to pray? Because it says, "Ve'ivdu et Hashem b'leivav shalom." You should serve God. You should serve God with all of your heart. Or it also says, "Avet Hashem v'la'avdo b'chol levavechem v'chol nafshechem." You should serve Him with all of your heart. Serve Him. So it says, what does it mean serving God? Serving God means in this mimer, what he says, serving God means is returning your energy to the Creator, returning your love, returning your concentration, your attention, your thoughts, speech, action, emotions, simply connect them to their source. Because why? God is the most valuable and real thing, if you want to call it a thing. I mean, in relation to us, I guess you can call him a thing in the world. But the fact is that as soon as you realize that God is not a thing, that God creates everything constantly. So there's really basically nothing except for him. But he's the creator. He's in one way is outside of everything. But he's also infinitely close because he's creating me. He's creating you. He's creating us all the time. We should feel that, right? Says, well, we don't feel it, and God purposely made it that way. We don't feel it, and in order, yes, to feel it, we have to do avodah. We have to do service. We have to work, and that's basically the idea of the sacrifices, of prayer, of the constant offering. So, the Rebbe says that in the offering there is everything gets burned up. There is the bones and the sinews. And that comes from intellect. It says the bones and the sinews, that all the white, the white parts of the child, they come from the child, from the father. That's what the father contributes. Father and the mother, right? So the father continues a seed, which is white, and the mother has the egg, which is red, I guess. I mean, it's connected to blood. So this idea of white, that's the idea of intellect. From the father. Father's intellect. The mother is more emotions. Av'im. mother that gives birth to the emotions. And so that's what it means burning up this offering. How does it correspond to us? Our intellect and our emotions. We have to connect them to the Creator. So there were really 5 elements. If you saw in the animal it's sacrificed up, there were really 5 things. And we only talked about 4 of them. There's the bones and the sinews. That's connected to the white part. That represents the intellect, our intellect in us. And then there's the blood and the flesh and the meat. That's also burned. All this is burned up on the blood and the flesh. That's red. That's like the emotions. So we should have our intellect. We should have our consciousness of God, the fact that He's creating us and how great He is, and to be aware of His greatness. And we can arrive at that by thinking into the words of the Psalms of David that we say before we get up to this one part of, before we get up to Shema Yisrael. We say Shema Yisrael, it says you should love God with all of your heart. So all these thinking about God, and then you become more and more aware of God, then you have love of God, intellectual love, and then you have emotional love of God. And that's burning up these 4 elements of the bones and sinews. That's the intellect, and blood and meat. That's the emotions. But we didn't get the fat yet. In the offering, there's a fat. Chelev. Okay, so if you remember, yesterday we got up to here and we said that after a person thinks properly about God, and he gets emotional about God, and he realizes how real, incredibly real God is, and that God is actually creating us, He's infinitely good. You get emotional. So then afterwards, right, then you have great chukka, great desire and thirst in your heart, and tremendous love, like flaming fire, to love God with all of your heart. And everything you want is just to serve your Creator. I mean, we're so amazingly lucky that God is. We should at least say thank you, huh? At least say thank you, God. You're creating me. Thank you, giving me my eyes and my ears and my nose. And what do you want in return? Just appreciation. Just that we should appreciate the fact that you're giving. Just say thank you. That's all. Says the Rebbe. But when you start to realize the reality of God, the reality that it's not just a religious idea. I mean, Judaism is a religion, right? But it's a true religion called Dat Emet. Because we're connected to the Creator who creates all of these other spirits and gods and everything that all the other nations worship. And He's creating it constantly. He's creating time. This is a very difficult idea to comprehend. Not that difficult, but to internalize and realize. That's really called service of God. Once a person does have a little sense of this love, or a lot of sense of this love, and he has a tremendous desire for God, and he realizes, wow, how foolish I've been that I didn't have this love of God. Then afterwards, if so, to gadol chukah b'tzimon lev, have a tremendous love for God. With all of your heart, and all of your desire will be to love God with kalot nefesh, with your whole soul. Right, like expiring of your soul. You have all these. I'm bringing this example now because the Maimonides brings the example. There's all these songs, movies, right, about this, how this love songs. He's thinking about this woman, and he thinks about her day and night, and he's longing for her, and he wants her, and this, because she's so real to him. She's so real. He's just thinking as her picture is in his mind. Well, that says the Rambam. This is the Rambam. This is not my example. So it's a holy example. So the Rambam says that's how much we should love God. In other words, it should be that real to us. Some people that maybe for money, people go for crazy for money. Some people go crazy for the baseball team, for their soccer team. It's so real, they just go crazy. They do anything to get as close as they can to the team. They have a shirt that was autographed by one of the players, by this goalie, whoever it is, a pair of shoes. The thing that you put it on you can sell it for $50 million, $100 million. right? Everybody wants it because it was once worn by, who knows, the Schmerl Groys, the great soccer player, who knows. And because he loves this team, everybody loves. Well, that's the way people should be for God. I mean, God is much closer to us than the soccer team or whatever. He's certainly doing more for us. The soccer team just gives you a little identity and excitement, and it gives you a feeling of belonging and success and vicarious, victory or whatever you want to call it. All right, but it's something. But God is creating us all the time. He's creating even the soccer team. He's creating everything. So at least we owe him at least that. Well, after you do have this love of God, and you really feel this, afterwards, then these words, right? That's step one, intellect, emotion. But afterwards, we get to the next step: thought, speech, and action. Torah, commandments. After you have this tremendous burning love of God and this amazing awareness, at least a little bit of awareness of how much we owe God, everything. And what does he demand? He doesn't demand that we cut off our leg or that we, just go up on a mountain and fast for the rest of our lives or something. No, he wants us to be normal people and get married and etc. like that. But one thing he really wants us to do is the commandments. That these things that I command you that you should do today, it should be on your heart. This is the hektar chilib. Now that's the fats. Vashmanis, the fatness of the animal that's being sacrificed. Fat is pleasure. Cain ba'adam is saying also a physical person, ki yer av lechol, when a person wants to eat. Al yedei retichat, yer av lechol, al yedei retichat adamim, because he is, right, he really desires to eat very much. He really wants to eat. And afterwards, he gets satisfied, ki yerav, when he was hungry, and his will gets satisfied. Then he gets fat. Why do people get fat? Here, some people say you get fat because of the calories, because of this. Here, the Rebbe is saying that you get fat. That could be also, but you get fat from the pleasure. From the pleasure that you get from eating a good meal, that makes the person fat. Because of the pleasure, because his desires were filled. So it is also in serving God. I think we learned it just recently. There was a very holy person called Nahum of Chernobyl. Nahum of Chernobyl, was it? Yes. And that he was fat. And he used to eat almost nothing. But he said he was fat from saying Yehi Shmei Rabba Mavorach, a certain prayer that he really, giving thanks to God, it made him so happy, gave him so much pleasure, it made him fat. So the fatness comes from pleasure. Also in the service of God, after a person has this tremendous desire and thirst for God, that a person arouses when he loves God with all of his heart, then he should take to his heart, that after he has then it says, look in Shema Yisrael, what does it say? You should love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your might. And it should be that these things, should be on your things or words. These things or these words should be on your heart all the time. What are these words that you're supposed to have on your heart all the time after you love God with all of your being? Divrei Torah. This is the words of Torah and the commandments. So that's what it says. You should love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. And it should be that these things that I command you today, and these things that I command you today, what are these things or these words? That's the words of Torah, and the things are the commandments. This is what Anochi, I, says God, my essence, Mitzvah is commanding you. The whole world is created from God's name, but the commandments that comes from God's essence Not just in this aspect, what you just got excited about, how God creates the world. That is just God's name, or not even God's name, is the glory of the, not even God's, it's the glory of the name of the kingship of God. That's what the world comes from. So this little pointer skipped down. What happened? Ah, here it is. Shem Korbon Malchuso. But this is the level of Mamalik, how God fills all the worlds. That's how God, he creates the worlds. That's creation. That's how he creates you. That should make you really excited. That's what you got excited about when you were praying. Now after that, now that's what you want. Now it says, God, do what I want. You're excited about me. Yes, then forget about what you want. You want to be closer to me. You want to love me. You want to this. That's wonderful. That's good. I want you to do that. But there's something a little bit deeper I want. What do I want? I want you to create, to do Torah, learn Torah, and do the commandments. The whole world is created from this aspect of God, Mamalik Him alone. This is the level of his shame. This is just God's name and not God's essence. But the commandments, Omri Mashiach Kirishanu b'mitzvotav, that God commanded us with his commandments, Shu moved Kirishanu. He made us holy with his commandments. What does it mean, made us holy? This word Kirishanu, it means several things. But the two main things it means, and basically it's the same thing, is to be holy and to be married. Married, getting married is called Kiddushin. There's a whole Talmud about it. Right? At mekudeshet, you are married to me. But when a man marries a woman, it means he separates her from the rest of the world. Nobody else can marry her. The same thing as God made us holy. He married us at Mount Sinai. He made us separate. And every time we do a commandment, we repeat that. Asher Kirishanu b'mitzvotav, that God is making us holy with his commandments. And he made us holy with his commandments on Mount Sinai. Shehu moved all that a person is separated for the whole world. Much higher than all these things we just got excited about, how God is creating the world and how he's everything, so many creations, and so the creations are so immense, and the angels are 3 times as big as the universe, and there's infinite numbers of angels, and they're absolutely nothing compared to God. That's all called Memalik, how God fills the worlds. But the commandments, when a person doing a commandment, this connects you in reality, not just in theory. In fact, it connects you, just like God is creating me and you, not in theory. In reality, he's creating us. So also, there's a much deeper and real connection when we do the commandments. That's called getting married to God. That surrounds godliness. That's the purpose of the Jewish people. That's the holy temple. That's the holy temple that we're learning about. To show that God not only creates the world, but he creates the world for a purpose, and this purpose comes from his essence. That's the holy temple. That's what the Jews are supposed to reveal to the world. That's what it means. The Jewish people are holy to God. Reishis Tevuato. This is the Haftorah, the end of the Haftorah. This Shabbat we're going to read from Jeremiah, the prophet. Prophet Jeremiah. Reishis Tevuato, Tevuato. Really, it's the beginning of God's produce. What does it mean, God's produce? This is the aspect of God that fills all the worlds. That's God's produce. This is the whole order of creation. There's no Asev, there's no plant that hasn't got some sort of a spiritual force, a mazal, that hits it and makes it grow, it says. Higher and higher levels, the angels and spheres and the Yetzirah and Bria and different levels and Bria and Atzilus. That's the whole creation. Masha'en Ken Yisrael, the Jewish people, they're also part of the creation, right? But they are the beginning of God's produce. God's produce is the world. But the beginning of it, that's the Jews. Kodem, they're before the creation. Because Kodesh, they are holy. The Jewish people are a holy nation, like the holy temple is a holy building. It's a building like every other building. It's in the world, holy temple, but it's holy. It's totally different. Totally, all the buildings that there are in the world, beautiful buildings in the world, the high buildings, there's buildings, where it is, and who knows where it is, in Dubai or somewhere, the highest building in the world, the biggest building in the world, the most beautiful building in the world, the most interesting building in the world, right? They're all part of the world. And the holy temple is not necessarily, it's certainly not the biggest, and it doesn't have to be the most beautiful. I mean, maybe it's impressive a little bit, but the main thing that's impressive is that this is the building that God told the Jews to build. This is God's building. That's what it means that the Jewish people are holy. They're holy. It means that the Jewish people are married to God. Because God made us holy. He married us with his commandments. And in through the commandments are drawn down God's upper pleasure. Just like in a wedding. Baruch Hu. That we Jewish people were all married to God. This connects God with the world. Hagam, even though Shalom mitzvahs, that the garments, that the commandments are also physical things. They're also clothed in physical things. Zerayim, Moed, agricultural laws, right? You have to give a tithe from your produce, and you can't plant these type of things together. And there's Orla and all these plants, and Moed, all the different holidays, how to eat matzah, when to eat matzah, how to sound the shofar, right? What a sukkah is, physical things. Trumos, maestros. Hine al zeh ne'amar, like it says, Pekudi Hashem Yeshorim Misam Chelev. It says that the laws of God, the orders, God's laws, commandments are straight, and they make the heart happy. Pirish, what does it mean? Yesharim, what does it mean? They're straight. She'enum b'derech histalshlus. They come straight down from God. They're not in the way of the creation of the world, which is cause and effect. One spiritual level creates a lower spiritual level, and that lower spiritual level creates a spiritual level that's lower than it. That's called the chain of creation. B'chinas hester panim, that every level is concealed from the level that's below it. Yerida Madregas, and coming down from level to level, mitaveh or mitkashem, that God creates the world in such a way that the higher levels, there's more revelation of God. The higher levels, and the lower levels are more thick. They're more physical, so to speak. The holy, that's why the angels are burning up, because they sense that God exists, but they don't exist. In this world, we don't even sense it. But they sense it. They want to go up to a higher level. They're burning up. The holich b'derech of Seder is labshus. That from godly awareness and intellect and perception, it becomes human perception. That's how the world is. But there's one big exception, and that is the commandments. The commandments straight. It's like a straight tube. The Kudi Hashem and Yesharim, they're straight. Shenimshach b'hem or ein sof, is drawn to them the infinite light of God. Kamo lamayla, just like it is above. Key, because the commandments, they are God's wisdom and God's will. This is not just a product of God's speech or God's creative power, like the world is. The Torah and the commandments are the reason for God's speech. That's God's essence, is God's wisdom, that's the Torah. God's will, that's the commandments. Therefore, they make us happy. Why they make us happy? Because we know that we're making God happy. Lamata begalus niglos or ein sof, because there's revelation of God. That was in the world. When you do a commandment that reveals God in the world, maybe you don't know it because we can't really appreciate God. Can't appreciate God. I remember once I heard a story. There was somebody that was walking down the street. It was in Mexico or something. And he saw in the trash a nice picture. And it wasn't dirty. It wasn't dirty. Picked it up. He said, this is nice, I'll put it on my wall. Took the thing home. His wife said, "What is that? A picture? Look at the nice." Yes, it's a really nice picture, isn't it? Where'd you find the trash? Oh, is it dirty? Is it smelly? No, very nice. I guess it was in a frame. Who knows what? Put it up on his wall, and that there it stood. Somebody came into his house, a guest. Said, "Voila! I thought you were. Where'd you get that picture from? Huh? I thought you said you worked in a factory." You said, "Yeah, I work in a factory. So that picture is worth like $2 million. What? I'm telling you, let me have a look at it." He takes a little magnifying glass out. He looks. It says, "This is a genuine." I don't know the name of the. It's some painter I never heard of before. So this is the name of Aguilar or someone. This is the. Really? Are you kidding? He said, "No, listen. If you want to listen, I'll call a friend of mine. He'll come. He's an expert from the. Sure, it is worth." He took it to an auction or something, whatever it is, and he got like $2.5 million for the picture. What am I telling you the story for? In other words, here's just a simple thing. Here we have what's a picture? It doesn't look like nothing. You have a Picasso picture. If you see a Picasso picture in your house, it's a picture. It looks like a 3-year-old child could make such a picture like this. It's a blob over here and a line over there. You have all these, right? Ooh, this a genuine Picasso, $300 million. What? Are you kidding? Yeah, that's a 300. I can do the same thing. No, that would be a fake. That wouldn't be real. That would be worth nothing. This is a genuine one. Because we can't recognize, even just a simple thing as a picture, right? We can't recognize the value, the preciousness. The same thing, you do a commandment. We don't recognize what's going on when we do a commandment, what the commandment is. But the fact of the matter is that it's coming from the essence of God, and that should make us tremendously happy because it's revealing not just the author of this, the painter of this picture. And if the painter himself would come in, oh, he was in my house. Here you have God is with every single person that does a commandment, every single one. That's the holy temple. People would go to the holy temple and they would become happy, more than the simcha. You feel that there's a creator, and even more, you're being created for a purpose. Like it says, that's what it says. The commandments are straight. Those people, their heart goes straight to God, and through the commandments, there's happiness. This is the happiness that comes after the thirst that you had for praying and pray. In other words, the thirst that you had, that gives you the appreciation that you can understand who the author is, what's going on. By means of your love that you had, now you're satisfying this thirst by clinging to the infinite light of God, really. When a person puts to his heart, that this is the Torah and the commandments that lefanenu, which are before us, their sources, Hari Kodesh, the commandments that we have in front of us. Their source is what's called the holy mountains. In other words, there's such a high essence of God, and that the commandments are straight to God. It doesn't go through the whole order of creation. They're above the spiritual. Let's put it like that. What does it mean, straight? They're above the spiritual. Between us and the essence of God are all these spiritual worlds. That's called the order of creation. That's called the spiritual world. These spiritual worlds are not God. The spiritual worlds, in a way, they conceal God. And in a way, the spiritual worlds conceal God more than this world. Why? Because this world is ignorance. The upper worlds, there's awareness of God, but you're satisfied with what you get. Oh, this is it. And that's why all the religions in the world, without any exception, are all worshiping these spiritual levels. They call it God, they call it whatever, but they're all, and there's what to worship. It's tremendous pleasure in these upper worlds, but it's not straight to God. It's not straight. The commandments that go straight to the creator of all these spiritual worlds. Sha'or ein sof mamash, that the essence of God, nigla b'hem, is revealed in them, in the commandments below. Kamola Maila, just as they are in its essence. Right? All the angels are screaming, yelling. There are all these spiritual, where is God? Kodesh, Kodesh is high. And it says, Mole Kala Oretz Kavoda. Where is God found? In this earth, when Jews do the commandments. That's why it's so terrible that the Holy Temple was destroyed. Because the Jewish people opted out for this type of happiness, which comes from forgetting about yourself. And they opted in for spiritual happiness, physical happiness with it. She'ein sham hester panim al or avaya kedusha, so that in the commandments there's no concealment of God whatsoever. And this will satisfy a person's soul. Ki yarav, ki yirav, when a person's soul is hungry. The yashlim chefzo, and this will fill our desire for ratzono and our will. Of course, first of all, you have to have this desire and will. You have to. That's what prayer is for, right? That's like the sacrifices. But as soon as you do that, then by doing the Torah, the commandments, that's the fat which is in the sacrifices. Mitzvahs, and Talmud Torah corresponds to everything. Because the commandments are anochi. God's essence is commanding you. Hainu, hayom davka. When do you do these commandments? Now. Now, in this time of exile, now when our soul is in our body, now when we're in this world and we don't perceive God at all, we have to work really very hard and think and contemplate and refine ourselves in order to think about God. Now is the time when you do the command. After a person dies, there's no more commandments. When you die, you get pleasure. But in this world, God gets pleasure. And the fact that you're giving God pleasure through the commandments, that should make you very happy. Because you can feel it. God is your creator. He's right here. Hayom now. Bechinas hayom lasotam. Ki bechinas hayom lasotam, because doing them now, when the soul is in the body here in this world, only now is drawn down from Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu Soviv Kol Almim, which surrounds all the worlds, above all the spiritual, which is above the whole entire chain of creation, because asiya la'ela, because action is of prime importance. Action, to actually do the commandments. And when a person dies, there's no action. He hasn't got any body. So now that's what the Rebbe is saying. That now we have understood in a very general way how the daily offerings, what's called the tamid, the sheep in the morning, the sheep in the evening, close to the evening, how that corresponds, the sheep, this total offering that's offered up, how that corresponds, what we do now to fill that connection between us and God of the commandments. How? So it says by thinking about God, contemplating God, coming to love God, coming to understand God, coming to love God, then that totally involves your intellect and your emotions. That corresponds to the bones and the sinews, the blood and the meat of the sacrifices. By doing the commandments and learning the Torah, that is like the fat of the commandments. The fat is the joy, the happiness, the pleasure. Behold, derech ishtalshel is according to the way of creation of the world. Ilo v'olo, cause and effect alone. Loya nishtalshel ad olam asiyah. The fact of the matter is, not only the commandments come from the essence of God, but really this physical world comes from the essence of God. Just by this making from one spiritual level to a lower spiritual level and a lower spiritual, more concealment, you still would not get this physical world. Ki hisabos agashmi is because the physicality of this world, the chumioso, could not be created from spiritual. The ein ruchne is poel bagashmi. Spiritual does not affect the physical. Spiritual does not affect the physical. Spiritual is spiritual, physical is physical. Right? A sort of an exception is the soul and the body. Right? Everything in the world has a soul. The soul is sort of spiritual, even though it's the lowest part, that part of the soul which enlivens our body, that's called the nefesh. That we have sort of in common with the animals. But the rabbi say, like we said before, there is no plant in this world that does not have some spiritual force above, shemakabo, that influences it and tells it to grow. Shagidol shel tzamach, that the fact that everything in this world is alive and that it grows, this comes from a spiritual force that we don't exactly feel. Asher ba'oretz hu al yedei amazal. This is what's called mazal, a mazal. Mazal also means to drip. But that's the spirituality of it, the life force inside of it, that's spiritual. But the actual physicality of this plant or the animal or the rock or the person, the physical, the spirituality that lasts after a person dies is spiritual. What happens to an animal after he dies? And then also, I guess the spirituality still lives with it, because an animal is like, 100% body, the animal, a little tiny bit. But a human being is intellect, and that remains after a person dies. So that's the spiritual aspect. But the physical aspect of the world is not created from the spiritual. For instance, the actual physical plant, the Esav Agashmi, the physical plant, the physical tree, what makes it grow, what makes it alive is the spiritual. But the physicality of it, Ein al yadei mazel, it doesn't come from any spiritual power. Raku koach eloki ein sof. This comes directly from God. Mamish. So we've called this is the same aspect where the mitzvahs come from. Huh? So if so, what's the difference between doing a commandment and eating a hot dog? They're all physical things. The physical comes also from the essence of God. We'll learn. There's levels in Sovikom. We'll see. So really, the commandments says what comes from God's essence. Okay, shalafanav ruchnis v'gashmi shavah, because by God, spiritual and physical is the same thing. Okay, shem shu palva also ruchnis, just like God creates the spiritual worlds from nothing to something. Also, God makes the physical world from nothing to something. So the spiritual does not create the actual physical. Both of them are created from nothing, because that's what it was before 5,781. In a few months, it's going to be 82 years. There was nothing. So the basic building block of the world is nothing. And God is constantly bringing this nothing into something. God himself is doing it. The way he does it, that's called the order of Hishtalshlu, the chain of creation. That's all these Kabbalistic books. But the fact of the matter is, after all, it's God himself is doing it. In order for there to be a physical yesh, loch, and therefore, Eser Maimoros, and at the 10 utterances that God made, that God said when he created the world, it says, it says there should be the fourth day. God said, let there be lights in the heavens. Because see, and it says that God made the lights in the heavens. Became Yerakia on the second day. It says, let there be a firmament. And God made the firmament. The earth should put forth living animals. God made the animals, sixth day. On the physical, it says, yeah, there should be. And it says, Vayas, that God actually did it. That when God said the plan of it, right? By a plan of it, that's God's planning. But when it was actually done, God himself did it. Right? It says, it should be. By the spiritual, it said, yeah, it should be. It doesn't say that God himself did anything. It just said it should be the plan. But when it came to the actual physicality of it, it was God himself that did it. That in the utterance, Shenivra ha'olam, that the world was created, haruchnis, that in the utterance that God created the spiritual worlds, he didn't create the spiritual, physical. Should be, that's one utterance. And then the physical was Vayas, he actually did it. Right? The plan of the thing, that's the spirituality of it. But the actual physicality of it, therefore, a person should be very, very happy. Gil of Aranan, and he should rejoice and jump and dance. It doesn't say dance. Ranan means another, like singing and rejoicing. When he does one of the commandments of God, Hamalubashas, which are in the physical world specifically. Because what are you doing? You're using one aspect of the essence of God, the physical world, and you're connecting it to even a deeper aspect of the essence of God, which is Davka Shehu or Ein Sof Soviv Ka'omi Mamish. So therefore, you're taking one aspect of God's essence, which is this physical world, and you're connecting it and revealing it another aspect, a deeper aspect of the essence of God, so which is the reason why God is creating the physical world. That's the commandments. This will satisfy your thirst and your desire in loving God. So, but you have to appreciate it, right? Like this picture I told you about by the Mexican artist. You have to appreciate what you're doing. Here we have the commandments that are worth more than billions, they're worth more than the whole world. And we have to appreciate it. And the way to appreciate it, the only way you can appreciate it is by, first of all, appreciating the fact that God is creating me and God's creating the world and how amazing God is and how infinite God is and how there's nothing except for God. Then when a person gets, his heart gets involved in this, like it says, with all your heart, your soul, your might, then you appreciate the commandments. And that's the constant offering that's offered up. And there's more to it than this, but let's begin with that. Now we're going to continue in the Sikha of the Rebbe about making here the land of Israel, making the land of Israel wherever you are, even in the Ukraine. Let's talk about this in a moment.